So project toilet upgrade or modification is in order. Going to be replacing the standard toilet with a Nature's Head composting head, and this is how I'm going to do it. Switch the camera around here. So cleared out the room, taking off those little nuts from underneath the toilet. Also, there is a screw-on water line behind the toilet here. You can kind of see it back there. I had to unscrew that. That just unscrews by hand. And one of the trickier parts of this install is going to be the venting, because you have to vent the composting head outside the van. But I found a good spot, and this is a 59G, by the way. So back here, this cover panel can be removed, and then in the very back there's actually a hole in the floor, and I'll show you from the outside. I kind of did some measurements, and there's a spot I can drill down and do the cutout for the vent. And then I'm planning on stealing 12-volt power from this outlet right here to run the fan. Still got to tap into that and get a voltmeter on it to check, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be solid 12-volt power. The fan draws almost nothing. So yeah, next up is just remove those bolts, or the nuts I should say, and then lift up the toilet and see what I find. Okay, so the toilet actually comes off super easy. It literally just lifts off after you take the nuts off. Now I gotta figure out a way to clog or block off the drain to stop odors coming up. So I'm gonna figure out a cap for that and then go from there. Build a platform for the other toilet. You can see the freshwater supply line back there that I unscrewed. But yeah, that's next step. Okay, so the toilet is out. Got a rag shoved in the flange to block the smell, which wasn't too bad, thankfully, since this toilet was only ever used for number one. But anyway, I've got the screws taken out. These guys are in the perimeter here, and now I gotta cut all the sealant and try and pry up this flange and see what I'm gonna deal with, or what I'm dealing with, to get a cap put on the end of that. I still gotta try to figure out how to plumb the black water tank to the gray water tanks if I can, but that's gonna be a challenge. Well, we'll see if I figure that out on this run. Might have to be later. Okay, so made a base plate out of expanded PVC that is going to rise or raise the toilet up above the old flange. And so I'm gonna pop that in, and hopefully it fits. Did a few measurements, so it should be good. Pop it in and see how it looks, and then if it's good, we'll screw it to the floor and make sure we seal the screws off so we don't have any leaks. Here we go. Okay, so this is gonna sit down there, moment of the truth. See if these measurements worked out okay. Oh yeah, awesome. Okay, so now it's gonna screw this down to the subfloor, and then the Nature's Head is gonna sit on top of it. Bree is out fetching a sewer cap for this so we can cap it off so no more smells. And then I gotta start working on the vent hose. I think it's gonna go through this back wall and then down through the floor. And I gotta cap off that fresh water line so it doesn't leak when we turn on the pump. So we continue. Okay, so the base plate is screwed down. I actually only used 4 number 10 screws, just because there's not a whole lot of leverage. This doesn't overhang the existing plate by very much. There's not gonna be much leverage on them, so they're all just in shear, stopping them sliding around. And they've all got a little bit of sealant on them to stop any water from when we're showering getting down below. And I'm actually gonna leave these old flange bolts from the toilet just sitting in here, because when I put the Nature's Head on top, it'll keep them there. But if we ever have to retrofit the old one back, for instance, if we sell the van and somebody really wants a standard toilet, it'll be an easy reinstall. I'll just dig out this sealant right here, slide them in, and glue them back in place. Yeah, so at this point, just waiting for the flange stopper thing, can't remember what that's called, and the stopper for the freshwater supply, and I'm going to start mocking up the base for the Nature's Head. This is 16 by 14, by the way, if anyone's interested in dimensions. And then I just measured from the back wall to the center of this hole and did my cutout with the jigsaw. It doesn't have to be perfect. I didn't bother too much about the aesthetics, just because the Nature's Head's gonna cover it. So it's decent, but definitely not a work of art. Okay, we're at toilet positioning phase right now. So Nature's Head recommends a minimum 1.5 inch clearance to the back wall. So I'm actually shooting for almost 2.5, because I know it's a little easier when you're tilting the unit back up to get the top of the toilet back on. If you have a little more wiggle room, it's a little easier. So I have the brackets mounted, the mounting brackets temporarily mounted right there. And now I'm gonna mark with a Sharpie on either side. You can see there's the other one, see that more clearly. So mark the bracket on the base with a Sharpie, and then you can see that's not actually quite straight. We'll straighten it out so it looks good. But mark it, then move it, then mount the brackets with longer screws. I don't like the screws, they're only, the ones they provide are I think only 3/4, maybe 1 inch, but I'm using slightly longer screws so that goes all the way down through into the base and for the brackets. And then do the test fit, make sure everything fits properly, then start playing with vents and electric. Okay, so the brackets are in. I did make the mistake, if you noticed, I had the 2 screws back there and 2 screws roughly there and there. They were almost directly underneath where the bracket screws needed to be, so I filled those holes with sealant, and then these screws are long enough that they go all the way through. So it ends up being 6 screws holding down this plate. And so now the head can be dropped in, and I get to start playing with the vent. And I think the vent line is going to go straight down through this back corner and then down out the bottom of the van. I'll show you that when I get there. Okay, so the 12-volt wiring for the fan plug, we removed this panel over here. Finn is helping me. So this panel's gone to give us access, and then I found the wires that connected to the back of this outlet, and we cut them, and we're gonna connect in line with the wiring for the fan. So we will keep going here and get that connected so that we can plug in to the side of the head. Okay, so we are ready to make some holes. I did a pilot hole down in the corner here, and that was after some measurements, but that's gonna be perfect. So now I'm gonna take this hole saw and drill down through there so the hose can pass through, and then I'm gonna put the hose, the vent hose, down through there and then seal around it so that if we're showering in here, water won't run down below there. And the wiring is connected in the back, and so then I'll also drill a small hole for the wiring to pass down, get that passed through, and I actually already tested it. That does run. So yeah, coming along. And then I gotta put the cap on that drain, so that'll be one of the last things. Cool. Okay, hole is drilled. You gotta be really careful not to ram the drill down through there, because there are, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, but there's some hot water lines down in there. Shine a light there. So you gotta just make sure you don't, slam the drill through when it drops through, but you can, it's fairly soft wood, so you can drill with a lot of control. I'm gonna put the hose down there. Okay, so this was a bit of an exploratory mission. I'm under the van right now. That's the front. Under the back here, here's the black water tank. Had to do some measuring and exploring, and figured out that a hole right here, and actually I poked this piece of welding rod up to check, but a hole right here in this cavity ends up in the center of that compartment back there. And so I drilled a small pilot hole, poked the welding rod up so we could see it to make sure it was in the clear. And now I'm gonna follow through that hole with our hole saw so we can pass the hose out of the boat and vent the air. I mean the boat, see, I work on boats too much. So we can pass the hose out of the van, and then I will be putting a cap on it. I'll show you that in a little bit, but it's a little vent that will stop the wind from counteracting the fan load, blowing air back up the pipe. It's a very small fan. All right, so that's how thick the floor is, in case anyone's wondering. I would say solidly 7/8, maybe 3/4. Hole is drilled, the hose is run. Just gotta plug that drain. Oh, we ran the electrical too. That's run up through the floor from that compartment. So we're gonna put a hose clamp on here, seal around that hose once I figure out the length, seal around that, put the toilet in place, and then we're good. So the plug that I bought is too tall to plug the drain, so I made a wedge type plug out of expanded PVC, and I'm just going to seal that in there, and the weight of the toilet will also hold it in place. So we'll see how that goes. Let's see. So that actually fit great. The wedge fit in there perfectly, and I did run a little bit of just not a crazy adhesive, but adhesive sealant around the perimeter just to seal it fully. And again, I've just left these flange bolts in here because they're below the level. So the base is done, hose is run. Gonna figure out the length on that once I pop the toilet back in shortly, and the wiring run is done. So we drilled that through, and that is now connected. Down below, I've actually tested it. I plugged it in just to the toilet to make sure it was gonna run. So yeah, we're set. I'm ready to pop this toilet in and have it ready to go. Let's see. Okay. There she is. Final product. Might have to make a couple little steps just because it's a little tall, but if I do, I'll post an update. That's the toilet installed. The last thing I'm going to do outside, I'll show you this, but this is the flange that's going to go on the outside just so that there isn't airflow coming back up into the toilet when we're on the road. So this will be facing back up against the bottom of the vehicle, and the hose will just be blowing air out into this section. But that'll be next. Okay, so here's where the hose pokes out. And then this little cowling is going to go up in here. And the idea is, my hand's kind of blocking there, I know, that it allows the air to come out, but it doesn't allow the highway speed wind to effectively blow back up into the tube, which would create back pressure on the fan, and the fan would really struggle because it's such a small fan it wouldn't be able to dry out things or get the fumes out. So nice little, I guess, feature. Nature's Head does sell their own one. It's plastic. I just have this on hand, so I'm going to use it. Just in terms of the electrical, I did end up tying into the source on the back of this plug. So I actually took out these switches, which allowed me to see in there, which then allowed me to fish and pull these wires out, and it's the white and yellow back here. So I basically cut the, well, first I pulled the fuse, so there was no power, but I cut the feeds to this plug and then spliced in line to them. So basically the plug shares the same power source, or the fan shares the same power source now as this plug. So fairly simple. Thankfully it's all just DC 12-volt wiring, so nothing you're gonna kill yourself doing. But we used high quality butt connectors and crimped them properly, so we shouldn't have any electrical issues going forward. Okay, so it's not a thing of beauty that I caulked around the whole perimeter. It's really hard to get a caulk gun up in that recess, but it's sealed so that no water when we're on the road in the rain can shoot up in there. And now I'm going to put that flange, the stainless flange, over the hose. Okay, clamshell is in, sealant on the screws, sealant under the vehicle. A little more than I wanted, but it's definitely sealed. That's it.